You've eaten raw fish. Sushi, sashimi, ceviche, thin slices of something that was swimming that morning, and you didn't think twice. But put a raw slice of bison in front of that same person, and something in them recoils immediately. Same category. Both raw meat. Both animal flesh, uncooked. So why does one feel like a delicacy and the other feels like a threat? Most people assume it's just culture. Sushi is trendy, steak tartare is a niche exception, and eating raw red meat is simply not something we do. That answer doesn't survive contact with the biology. The real difference starts with temperature. Fish are cold-blooded. Their internal body temperature matches the water around them, often near freezing in the case of sushi-grade tuna and salmon, which are frequently flash-frozen specifically to kill parasites before serving. Bison, like all mammals, run warm, around 101 degrees Fahrenheit internally. And warm-blooded flesh is a vastly more hospitable environment for the specific class of pathogens that make raw meat dangerous to humans. This is where the danger actually lives, not in raw as a category, but in what raw flesh from a warm-blooded mammal can carry that cold-blooded flesh generally can't. E. coli, salmonella, and listeria all thrive at mammalian body temperature. They're adapted to survive and multiply inside warm tissue, because that's exactly the environment they evolved to exploit. Fish parasites exist too, which is why sushi-grade fish is handled under strict freezing protocols. But the bacterial risk profile of warm-blooded mammal meat is a different order of danger entirely, and it's concentrated most heavily at the surface, where contamination during butchering occurs. There's a second layer hiding underneath the first, how the animal was killed and processed. A fish is typically caught, killed, and its flesh is largely sterile internally until cut. Minimal contact with intestinal bacteria if handled correctly. A bison, by contrast, is field-dressed, gutted, skinned, and butchered in conditions where contact between meat and intestinal contents is far harder to fully avoid. Ancient hunters processing a bison carcass on open ground had none of the sterile equipment modern slaughterhouses use. Every cut carried risk. Researchers studying foodborne pathogen prevalence have consistently found significantly higher bacterial contamination rates on raw beef and bison surfaces compared to sushi-grade raw fish prepared under controlled conditions, which is precisely why global food safety guidelines treat the two categories so differently, even though both are technically raw meat. But here's where the story gets stranger, because the danger isn't only chemical. It's inherited. Psychologist Paul Rosin's decades of research into disgust found that humans don't process all raw meat with equal instinctive caution. The aversion is calibrated, not universal. Populations with long coastal or riverine histories, where raw or lightly cured fish was a survivable, even routine part of the diet, show measurably less instinctive disgust toward raw fish than populations without that history. Meanwhile, aversion to raw mammal meat remains far more consistent across nearly all human populations, coastal or not. That consistency is the tell. It suggests the caution around raw mammal flesh isn't a cultural habit that some groups happen to adopt. It's closer to a hardwired response, shaped by hundreds of thousands of years where eating undercooked mammal meat carried a real, recurring cost, while raw fish, prepared quickly near the water it came from, carried a comparatively lower one for the populations that relied on it. Fire changes this equation entirely, which is part of why it mattered so much. Cooking bison meat reliably kills the bacteria that raw preparation can't guarantee against. Ancient hunters who cooked their meat thoroughly survived the pathogens that killed the ones who didn't. And, generation after generation, that outcome didn't just change behavior. It changed instinct. The unease you feel looking at raw bison isn't a rule someone taught you. It's a filter, refined over an enormous span of time, still running quietly underneath a decision you think you're making freely, which reframes the sushi on your plate. It was never that raw fish is safe and raw meat is dangerous as a blanket rule. It's that two different animals at two different body temperatures, carrying two different bacterial risks, produce two different evolutionary verdicts. One where caution relaxed slightly for a food source that was, for entire coastal populations, survivable raw, and one where it never did. You didn't choose to trust the tuna and distrust the bison. Something in you inherited that distinction long before you ever sat down at a restaurant table. A quiet piece of ancestral math, still running, still deciding what feels safe to eat before you've even picked up the fork.